Hello everyone, I'm Wendell Jones and welcome to this edition of the program Jones and Company. On this program, we examine the national issues of the Bahamas. And there are many issues that we can cover if we are talking about governance in the Bahamas. And today on our program, we have the pleasure of having once again the Minister of Agriculture and Marine Resources, the Member of Parliament for Maikal, that is Acland's, Crooked Island, Laon Key, Mayor Guana, and Inagua, the Honorable V. Alfred Gray. Mr. Gray, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much, Brother Jones. It's good to be here, and I trust that I can add to the debate.
Well, yeah, I'm sure you can. And BAMSI is in your portfolio as well, isn't it?
BAMSI, in fact, is.
Very good. Dr. Inyas, President of BAMSI, nice to have you here today.
But I'm not here in that capacity.
I know you're not here in that capacity. You're here in your regular capacity. Yeah. Having been on the program Jones and Company for 20 years, it's going into the 21st year, isn't it?
Right. I always say, Minister, Wendell has given me an opportunity to discover a side of myself which I didn't know I had by being on these programs.
That's very gracious.
Yeah. Yes. That is true. And he is a great columnist for the Bahama Journal, and Godfrey has been writing a series of articles on the new realities of the 21st century, which have been well received. I got a call from a friend in Washington, D.C., who read your column, and he was very delighted to see it.
The journal is very special to both of us, you see.
But you know, if Brother Jones hadn't been kind to you, I would be surprised.
Yes.
Because he has a history which is legendary.
Yeah.
First of all, he's from Acland's, and Acland's people, by definition, are nice people.
Yeah,
and so I am not surprised. That
but I would say this much: I've come to meet a lot of Acland's people since my relationship with them. And Acland's is one of the few places I'd never been, and he took me.
How did you find the people?
Oh, my wife wants to build a second home in Acland's.
Can I invite you to do so?
Oh, yeah.
Join me, quite frankly. I have just finished my house there, so please join me and let us have another house.
Oh, yeah.
Very good. Well, the minister is going to have us see his house very soon.
Soon, yeah.
Yes, I'll be delighted.
Hopefully we'll be there for the housewarming.
See, I want to live in one of those mountains in Acland's.
One of the mountains?
One of those mountains.
Going to Salina?
Oh, yeah. One of those mountains, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
On the range.
Oh yeah.
Okay. So how is Acland's, by the way? You've been representing, this is your third term in Parliament as a Member of Parliament for Acland's. How is it?
It's progressive, but slow. I think there are several aspects of Acland's that might be important to mention. Economically, it's slow. Spiritually, it's always growing. And geographically, I think it's far from the center of the city, and so most of what we would need would come to us more slowly and more difficult than if we were closer to New Providence. And so we have our challenges, but the resilience of the people of Acland's have always allowed them to survive. And in a word, they are surviving.
Minister, I don't think we can refer to Andrews anymore as a sleeping giant. I think Mr. Christie and you and Mr. Fitzgerald have awakened Andrews, right? But I do feel that Acland's is a sleeping giant.
I know it is. The difficulty in finding appropriate words to describe why this giant, Acland's, have not been awakened I really don't know. All I know is the southeastern Bahamas generally is finding economic development slow in coming. And it isn't because the government made policy decisions which caused that not to happen. I think the attraction of investors become more difficult the farther you move yourself from New Providence. And Acland's and Crooked Island and the rest of the islands in the southeast further removed than any other islands in the Bahamas, and so the extent to which those distances create lack of interest might be important to consider. I always invite those who are from those islands to spark the fire that would lend some development to taking place. But very few of our island people who've moved to New Providence, made good of wealth accumulations, have gone back to do anything of note. And that is not good, but it's true. And I still invite those who can, even if you only build a house, because any economic activity is economic activity which you do not have. So if 5 people build houses at the same time, you will find that most of the contractors or other men would be fully employed for the period of that construction time. Yeah. But it's not being done that way, and we still hope, because Auckland is still among the most beautiful islands in the Commonwealth, and I invite those who are of the economic wealth or vintage to visit. Once you visit, you'd find that building there or putting something of wood there might not be as difficult as it might seem just talking about it.
Minister, we've talked about these islands in the southeast, and we've used distance, in my opinion, as an excuse. I'll tell you why. When I was a boy, the Turks and Caicos Islands, Turks Island, was pretty much in the same shape as Auckland's, probably a little better off. Providenciales was a colonial outpost there. But we saw in the 80s and the 90s tremendous development in Turks Island, which is further east or southeast than Auckland's Crooked Island, Mayaguan, and the rest of them. It seems to me that if we put in place the infrastructure which is in Auckland and the airlift, that people will be more inclined to invest in those islands. In Auckland, for instance, you have 2 flights a week, Wednesdays and Saturdays. If you were able to have a flight, say, on a Monday, I believe that you would have more people from the southeastern islands who would be prepared to spend weekends in Auckland, say. You go on a Saturday, you come back on a Monday. And people would be more inclined to build second homes in that constituency, don't you think?
You are so correct. And the truth is, I have been a crusader for such happening. I've spoken to Bahamas Air, I've spoken to Pineapple Air, the smaller carriers, to see whether I could have persuaded them up to this point to have this 3rd or 4th flight per week. And so far, I have not been successful. Pineapple had a flight schedule which allowed it a year or so ago to go on a Friday and a Monday. So you had 4 flights per week, which augmented the flights that Bahamas Air did. When the plane of Pineapple was stolen from the airport and went to Haiti, because of the shortage of available aircraft, the flight was suspended, and they had not yet picked it up. And so it is difficult to persuade. I spoke to Southern Air, albeit not with any, from any government perspective, just as a matter of trying to create an interest. But they didn't seem to be interested at that time. And so I continue to talk, but there are 2 things that must never be forgotten. One is the traffic between the islands, Auckland's Crooked Island, is not always constant. During the holidays, you will find a burst of activity in terms of school children, like Christmas time, summertime. But ordinarily, a 50-seater may only have 30 passengers. But if you ask Bahamas Air, if they could continue a 30-seat capacity, a 50-seat capacity with a 30-seat full, they will tell you no, because that is a break-even position. And if they do it today, they may not be wanting to do it tomorrow. Now, if the government is willing to subsidize the airline, whichever it is, whether private or public,
Yeah, but Minister,
then these things could
the
happen.
government is subsidizing Bahamas Air in any case,
Well, ask Bahamas
at the
Air.
tune of millions of dollars per month.
I agree with you.
And so,
But Bahamas Air
if you are to develop
don't want to do it.
Auckland's and Crooked Island and Mayaguana, you're going to have to supplement the amount of airlift you have going into those islands. Otherwise, it's not going to happen.
I totally agree, and like I said, I am a crusader for it happening, and maybe if some others join me, it might lend to some success. But for me, I go on record as saying I have spoken to those who I feel could make a difference, and so far, Bahamas Air has not found it possible to do so. Pineapple Air is creating a possibility of which they have spoken to me recently. And so I'm hoping that Mr. Carey is watching, because he knows every time I see him, and perhaps that's once on an average once per month, I talk about this possibility of his starting the schedule again. So I'm still hopeful.
Another thing that is disturbing Auckland's Islanders is the stretch of road between, say, Pompey Bay and Salina Point. It has been in terrible shape for many a long year. As a matter of fact, it might be more convenient and more comfortable going to Salina Point by boat than going by a vehicle. All right? When is the government of the Bahamas going to fix that stretch of road? I don't know how many miles it is.
It's about 45 miles.
About 45 miles, okay. When is that going to happen? And Godfrey mentioned the mountains of Auckland. Probably the most picturesque area on the island. But it's almost impassable by vehicular traffic.
Well, I'm glad you brought the question to bear on this medium, because I know, and if the Prime Minister is watching, if the Deputy is watching, if my colleagues in Cabinet are watching, they will tell you that there is no week, yea, no month, that in Cabinet I have not spoken to the seriousness with which I approach this Auckland's Road and the expectation that I have for it being fixed like now. The government's position has always been, we will soon get to it. I opine by that it's a matter of putting resources where it ought to be as a matter of priority. The government is broke, generally speaking. And I think I understand, but that does not ease the pain. And they have shown me a document which suggests that the roads between Pompey Bay and Salina Point would cost about $24 million. I do not believe the government, as it is today, have the disposition to find that money without another loan or borrowing. I understand that. But I've reached a point where I will say to the government, borrow it and let's do it. Because I am pained. Every time I talk about it, it makes me feel less than the representative, because I do speak to it. But as part of the government, I try not to rock the boat, as it were, in public, because I'm part of the same government I will be criticizing. So I am that government, so to speak. So I understand the problem. But I'm hoping that when this Christmas comes and go, I will be singing a different song, and the conversation will be different, because honestly, I'm ashamed to go to Auckland's, particularly in the Salina Point area, because I know how my people feel. I share their pain, but as the representative, what do I do other than make the requests?
And that is the largest settlement in Auckland, isn't it?
It is the largest settlement in Auckland.
That is cut off from the rest.
It is basically, virtually.
Yes.
Yes, you are correct. And so I'm hoping that by the time the new year rolls around, I will have a date and time when the construction of those roads would begin. That's as much as I'm able to say, but I will not stop talking.
Okay.
Minister, earlier I alluded to, I felt that Acklands was a sleeping giant. Let me tell you one of the reasons why I say that. When Wendell and I were down there last year, year before, we went to a lodge up in what I call those mountains, owned by Rupert Cox.
In Masons Bay.
Right. And I was amazed that we were able to see, and I don't have to say this to you, but because I know you know it, but we were able to see the cruise ships go by.
Well, I have the same advantage of vintage.
Cruise ships come from Fort Lauderdale, come from Miami, come from Port Everglades, straight through the Bahamas, and it's like you could throw a rock from the land and hit one of those cruise ships as they pass Acklands.
I see the same thing when I go to Rupert's Place, because most of the ships from Miami going to South America passes perhaps 10 miles outside Acklands.
Exactly.
Between Acklands and San Salvador, and the truth is you see them night and day.
But Minister, my question is, I would hope in this national development plan that the government is creating, they would allocate resources for some sort of cruise port in Acklands.
Well, you must have heard the Prime Minister made such suggestive announcements, let me put it that way, because he spoke to a cruise port being built in the southeastern Bahamas.
Yeah.
It may not be that one could be built in every island.
No.
We understand that.
Right.
But today we are discussing with a developer who is interested in doing business in Mayaguana, taking over from where the I Group might have left off, or in conjunction with the I Group. And one of the interesting part of those discussions lead me to believe that approval is hinged on a cruise port being developed. And so far, everything looks positive. And I'm not at liberty to say when a formal announcement will be made, but we are very close to making that announcement. And hopefully it will be very early in the new year. I think the Prime Minister is leading the discussions, and I am privy to it. And we're just close to finalizing a development for Mayaguana, which will, by necessity, include the development of a cruise port.
You know, I can be presumptuous here, Minister, on the part of my friend. He's in the process of publishing this book. In my opinion, the best book he's published on Bahamian tourism. It's going to blow, it has a wow factor to it. And one of the aspects of tourism in the Bahamas has been the cruise ship. The cruise ship has introduced mass tourism. And I know the cruise ship could change the Southeastern Islands.
Well, you're not wrong, and anybody who understands how quickly monies could be made from the passenger count on cruise ships. Any cruise ship coming to the Bahamas brings more than 3,000 visitors on average.
Exactly.
So if you have one cruise ship per week out of the dozens that ply between Florida and South America, 3,000 people will sink Acklands. You certainly wouldn't find sufficient people to work for the day or the hours that it will change the economic landscape.
Isn't it your view as a politician, Mr. Gray, that the northern Bahamas has been looked after by successive governments, the northwestern part of our country, but the southeastern part of the country has been neglected in the main for about 30 years?
More than that.
that the concentration of the government, successive governments, the budgets of successive governments, they've all concentrated, they've all been allocated to the north and not to the south. Isn't it time to reverse that in order for us to stem this drift, this flow of our citizens from the southeastern islands to the north? And perhaps if you were to reverse that, you would get people from the north moving to the south.
But even more so, it is a national security issue. And
Yes.
That is the most vulnerable part of our country. Illegal immigrants,
Yes.
drug
Poachers.
trafficking, poaching.
Yes.
You know, the southeast, that's the soul of the
Yes.
Bahamas.
So successive governments have neglected the southeastern islands of the Bahamas, and by doing so, left the country wide open
Vulnerable.
and vulnerable to abuse.
Well, let me answer it by saying the time is always right to do right. And no island in the Bahamas ought to have, by policy decision makers, left behind. I cannot honestly say it's a policy of any government of which I know to leave behind any island.
But it happened.
Factually speaking, yes.
Yes.
But I answer it the way I must answer it, because I do not know of any policy decisions by the government to concentrate its development processes only in the north.
Yes, but wittingly or unwittingly, they took that policy decision. And that policy decision is seen in a new administration building for Abaco, the roads in Abaco, the airport. It is seen by the power station in Abaco. And just look at it. In Grand Bahama, and even now in Andros. The government intends to spend $100 million. You are asking for $24 million for 45 miles of road. But $100 million is being spent in Andros. And so it had to have been a policy decision by successive governments to spend the money in the north, whether you admit it or not. And I say wittingly or unwittingly.
I'll answer it this way. The question is rhetorical in that the suggestion was that successive governments have concentrated development
In the
north.
By policy.
No, that's what I meant when I say I don't know of any policy decision.
But it happened.
I'm saying as a matter of fact, that's what we see. But I cannot honestly say that I have been around a table where a policy position was we will concentrate in the north and leave the south behind.
But that is why I say wittingly or unwittingly.
Let me just go further.
Okay.
And I do say this. Development of these islands will be better expected from a private sector position or a public-private sector partnership. When people want to invest, the government encourages investment in the Bahamas. It says to an investor, we have so many islands, any one of them is good for investment. So the investor, he is the one who decides, having looked at the Bahamas, where he would like to put his money. And most, if not all, investors put their money where they think they will get the quickest and greatest return. Having said that, I am not saying at all that the governments have treated the southeastern Bahamas fairly, even in its own resources. But it's always, as I see it, governments prioritizing to get the greatest return. Abaco is more developed than Acklands and Crooked Island. So if the government spends $50 million in Abaco, it can get $100 million in return. If the government spends that same $50 million in the southeastern Bahamas, the basic infrastructure will take up that $50 million. So I'm saying most governments seem to feel that if I spend it where I can get the greatest economic return so that I can have money to develop the country, as it were, that's what they seem to do. That don't make it right, but that seemed to be what they do. They concentrate, as I see it, where they can get the greatest financial return to do the things that they need to do. Let me give you an
But the
example.
government has been short-sighted, Minister.
Yes.
And short-sighted to the point of being very negligent. Because Enos pointed out that we have poaching going on in the southeastern islands. We have a tremendous amount of illegal immigrants coming through the southeastern islands. It would seem to be sensible to have a proper defense force base in the southeastern islands, to have the islands, the economies firing on all cylinders, to encourage Bahamians to live there, so that you have population centers that make sense in those islands, right? But here again, we have been developing the Bahamas for the foreigner and not for the Bahamian. Because if we were concentrating on the Bahamian, then Auckland would have had a higher population than it has. You tell me about what, 400 or 500 people live on Auckland?
300.
300.
Or thereabouts.
Here it is, an island that is 3 times the size of New Providence. You have about 300 people. And you only have 300 people because governments have been negligent in putting the resources in the southeastern islands as they ought.
Negligent? No.
Yes.
I do not agree with you.
But it didn't happen.
No, but it is not, in my view, it is not a matter of being negligent. I think I have made it clear that having sat around the table for a little while, I know that the government seemingly put its resources where it can get the greatest return.
But how can you
justify
$120 million for a power station in Abaco, and you cannot spend $20 million to connect the major settlement in Auckland to the rest of the people in Auckland?
No.
I mean, that just doesn't make sense.
No,
that has to be negligence.
Well, you know, I agree with that. I agree with the fact that Auckland must get its road. But I don't know if it's negligent. That's my point. I think it's something different.
It is.
I'd like to say that
Auckland's people will tell you it's almost criminal.
no. Well,
I'm softening the blow.
I might be willing to say this, that every government since 2003, 2004, the FN has been in, PLP has been in, had that road on their mind. When we left office in 2007, a contract had been signed for the redevelopment of the Aucklands Road. When the FNM government came into power in 2007, they stopped the contract and did not continue the road. My view was, even if they did not want those contractors to do it, because the contract was already signed and the money was allotted for the roads, they should have given it to some other contractor to continue the process. But they stopped it for 5 years. We came in 2.5 years ago, and the government had not yet found economically, according to the financial powers, to do the roads.
Mr. Gray,
And
you know, those islands got electricity. Somewhere in 1998, was it?
97.
97, okay. You had islands in the north with small populations, with electricity from in the 70s. You're talking about 1997. The people, and you expect people to be in Auckland's Crooked Island, Mayaguana? Mayaguana has electricity throughout.
Yes, Mayaguana has
now, and it came very late, didn't it?
around the same time.
Okay.
But
All right.
all of the islands have basic infrastructure now.
All right.
And so things are not as bad as they used to be, but it's not as good as I would like to see them. My view is, if you can get,
But why the people in the southeastern islands have to wait? Why the people in Mayaguana and Acklands and Crooked Island and Long Key always have to wait for the people in the north to get all of the modern conveniences? The people in the southeastern islands still do not have cable television in some of those islands.
all of the islands have a form of cable television.
Yes, but I'm talking about all of the channels that are enjoyed by the people in the north.
You're correct about that.
All
They
right.
have about 6 channels,
Okay.
which is available for free.
They're almost second-class citizens.
No, I would not want to classify my people
I know
as
that
second
because
class
you
in any stretch.
you are a member of the government.
Yes.
And so as a member of the government, I expect you to defend the government.
No, I wouldn't defend the government.
But there is no reason.
I would be quiet if I had
There is no
to.
reason for people in Grand Bahama, Abaco, and the others in the north to be able to watch JCN, and tonight, looking at this program, and the people in your own constituency are not able to do so.
Well, let me just answer this way. You are correct in that
I know.
when the former government, see, you got to know the details. When the former government, meaning the FNM government, in 2008 or thereabouts, signed a contract with Cable Bahamas, for whatever reason, the southeastern Bahamas was left off the platter.
Second class?
No, what I'm
Second
saying
rate?
is I don't know the reason for that.
Yeah, but you should know by now.
No, the only reason.
But it's
No,
been many years.
you will have to
I've
guess
been-
the reason. You know it is not in the
But I've been
document.
running this television facility now for about 7.5 years.
No, but I've seen the document. There's no reason. They were just not put on the construction timetable.
So JCN has been on the air for 7.5 years, and you've been a member of parliament for Acklands, Crooked Island, and Long Key for going on 15 years, and we still don't know.
No, it is not being seen in the constituency, and that's bad. I'm just simply saying that the government that had the contract with Cable Bahamas
Yeah.
had an opportunity to put Acklands, Crooked Island, and the rest of the islands in the Cable Bahamas contract as they did the Northern Bahamas. They had not done that. Cable Bahamas, through Batelco, they are now talking about doing it. But we don't know when it will come. I only know they have 6 channels. We are seeking to get some other channels added to the system. But it's better than it used to be.
Okay.
And that's all I'm able to
let's
say. And
take-
every day I'm going to fight until it gets better.
Let's take a break here. Godfrey Inyas has a question for you. We take this break, we'll come right back.